Hi, I'm John DeDakis. I'm a novelist, a manuscript editor, a writing coach, and a former editor on CNN's The Situation Room with Wolf Blitzer. You're one-to-one with me, and I'm one-to-one with the entire Ken Kunken family. Um, Ken has written a memoir that is gripping and inspiring, and so we're going to talk with him and his wife, Anna, and their three boys, their triplets, Jim and Joe, and well, we'll figure that out as we go. You know them better, so you guys know all of the answers. But first, Ken, let's focus on you for a minute. You and Anna. Um, I had this is full disclosure. I did have an opportunity to work with you on your novel or on your memoir. In fact, let's just take a look at the cover, and I'm going to drop that font there. I Dream of Things That Never Were, the Ken Kunken story, and it is a tremendously inspiring and troubling memoir, and it starts with you becoming paralyzed from basically from the shoulders down in a football tackle that you were making at Cornell University in 1970. So I need to figure out what I'm doing here. Ken, welcome to One, and Anna too. Tell us, Ken, about what you were like before the accident, leading up to it. What was your life like? What were your plans? Where were you going?
Okay, thanks, John. Before I was hurt, I was just starting my junior year at Cornell University, where I was majoring in industrial engineering. But in learning a little more about me, basically, I always looked at myself as an athlete. I did everything I could to try and keep in the best shape that I could be in. And I was always doing something athletic, whether it be playing football or baseball, or in the winter, I was wrestling in high school. And being physically active was always very, very important to me.
And that's a picture of you when you were on the football team, and you were also a lifeguard. This is sort of I call this the Baywatch shot of you. I mean, you had a career trajectory, obviously athletic, and then tell us what happened.
Okay, well, at the beginning of my junior year, I was playing on the Cornell's lightweight football team. At the time, it was also called the 150-pound team. Now they call it the sprint football team. And it was during our fourth game of the season. I was playing on the kickoff squad, and I ran down the field in a game against Columbia. And when I tackled the ball carrier, I broke my neck and severely damaged my spinal cord. And as a result, I was instantly paralyzed.
Did you did you know how serious it was at the time?
No, definitely not. I thought maybe I had a pinched nerve. I didn't know what was going on. I felt an electric shock shooting through my body, and I went completely numb. And I just thought it was the impact of the tackle that was causing this, what I thought was temporary paralysis, and that within seconds I'd be back up on my feet.
But it didn't work out that way. This is a picture of you in the hospital, and the book that you've written really goes into excruciating detail because it was an excruciating experience. And I mean, you don't look very happy in this picture. Tell us what was going on in your mind, because here basically that's all you had to work with was your mind and your voice. So what was it like in those very first hours and days after the accident?
Well, it was incredibly frightening because I had no idea what a spinal cord injury actually entailed, and even what it was and what it meant for the future. I didn't know that this was going to be a permanent injury. And I found that the medical personnel seemed very reluctant to answer any of my questions. So from day to day, I didn't know what to expect in terms of whether I was going to get any recovery physically, and if so, when and what kind of recovery. And I was dealing with all sorts of issues, whether it be breathing issues or trouble with my bodily functions, whether it be the bladder or bowel movements, and even my blood pressure was an issue.
So, psychologically, how did you deal with all of those uncertain issues and the challenges?
I mean, that was probably one of the most difficult parts, was to keeping my mindset that there was still hope that things would improve, certainly physically, and that someday things were going to be better than they were while I was in the hospital. And I was very fortunate to have a very supportive family and friends who visited me constantly and did their best to keep my spirits up.
And I've got to think that there must have been, I mean, trying to be hopeful is a wise thing to do, but there must have been moments of despair.
Absolutely. I mean, I asked the doctors and the nurses and the therapists constantly, will I be able to move again? Will I get my movement back? And as I said before, they seem reluctant to answer that question. And the fact that they weren't telling me yes caused me to be severely depressed, because to me, that meant that they either weren't sure or that I wasn't going to. So it was really difficult trying to keep up any hope that things were going to improve. And one of my complaints was that I was not looking for false hope, but I was looking for some kind of hope that my situation would get better than it was.
Did you consider suicide?
Absolutely. Had I had the physical ability to take my own life, I probably would have done it. But I couldn't even do that at that point. I didn't have that option.
How does one, when they're alone in the middle of the night at 3 a.m, how do you deal with this?
John, my mind was racing the entire time. And whether it be 1, 2, 3 in the morning, I had no clocks in the room, so I couldn't even tell what time it was. But my mind kept racing back and forth that this may be permanent. And how was I going to possibly survive day to day in this condition with all the help that I would need? And it was really devastating to be lying there, staring at the ceiling or staring at the floor, trying to think what tomorrow was going to be like.
The memoir that you've written it's not just about the accident. It's not just about your rehabilitation and subsequent life, but you were told that the best you could hope for would be to be able to sell magazine subscriptions over the telephone. Obviously, your life did not turn out that way, and we want to get into more details about that. But you have not only a bachelor's, you've got 2 master's degrees, and a Juris Doctor. You're a lawyer as well. You became an assistant district attorney. You fell in love. Someone fell in love with you. But it doesn't even end there at being a love story. It also is the story of becoming a biological parent as well, not only of a child, but of triplets. And so the boys are with us as well. And so I want to just set aside your story for a second, Ken, and get to know the boys a little bit. And let me just bring these guys in solo. Hi, guys. Can you hear me?
Hello.
Okay. Where are you right now?
Right now, we're sitting in my dorm at Cornell University. We had the chance for James and Tim, my brothers, to come visit for the weekend and stay the night. So that was really nice, especially because this week also happens to be our birthday. So it's a kind of nice little birthday celebration between the 3 of us.
No kidding. So let's see. So you're Joey, right?
Yes.
Okay. And then let's see. Jimmy, who speak up.
Right here in the middle.
Okay. And so where are you a student? Are you all students at Cornell?
No, of course not. I don't think we could all be together like that. But I'm currently a student in SUNY Morrisville. It's about 32 miles southeast of Syracuse, and we're all pretty much upstate, so we're all very close together. We can easily visit each other.
And what are you studying?
I'm studying renewable energy.
Okay. And Joe, what are you studying?
I'm in the College of Arts and Sciences at Cornell University. So unlike my dad, who was in the College of Engineering, I'm in Arts and Sciences. Currently, I'm undeclared in the college. I don't have a declared major at the moment.
Okay. And Tim, tell us about you. Where are you and what are you studying?
So I'm studying at Syracuse University, studying both political science and magazine news and digital journalism at the SI Newhouse School of Public Communications and the Maxwell School.
So you're a person after my own heart, sir. So so we should definitely talk. Guys, let me ask you this as a group, and you can jump in depending on who wants to pick up the answer. But right from the beginning of your lives, you had a parental situation that was a lot different than most kids. You had a mom and a dad, but the dad was in a wheelchair. So right from the beginning, how did you process the situation where your dad's situation was so much different than a lot of your classmates?
Well, I guess for us, since we grew up, we didn't really know any better. For us, it was just, this is just our mom, this is just our dad. It wasn't anything spectacular. It was only when we started getting a little older that we realized, I guess, not really how different, but how unique our family was compared to other kids and families.
Did that put a lot of pressure on you? And anybody who wants to pick up on that?
I wouldn't say it put a lot of pressure on us. It kind of just made for an interesting story, if I could say, an interesting family to kind of show off a little bit. It's just our home situation. We always felt that it wasn't anything spectacular to us, as James said. It was just how we lived, how our family was, and we lived with that, and we loved it.
Tell me a little bit more about the showing off part of it, because in some ways, I would think that some people would be, I don't know, ashamed or embarrassed. But talk about the showing off part.
Well, I suppose for us, like growing up, it was just normal the whole time. Like we never really thought any better. It was just how it was, like how our family situation was, and we never really wanted anything else with that. But as for us being viewed as like a very unique family, later on, like as we were continuing to grow up, it started to become like a bit more surreal just to have like a lot of attention focused on our family and our father's accomplishments in a way that made it seem like it was just out of this world, when for us it was just like, he's our dad, we see him every day, that's just how it is.
Yeah, it was the best icebreaker for sure for meeting new people.
I want to bring Anna in here, the mom. I mean, you and Ken got married in 2003, and that's a long time to be married. But
20 years, yes.
Yeah, it's a long time, and it must be just a tremendous jolt of pride to see these guys and the direction that they're going with their lives. Talk about what it's like to be their mom.
Well, I always knew that, why you have kids. It used to be they're supposed to help you in your old age, right?
Right.
But we have them, I think, for the small thing as pride, as you said, just to be something to be proud of. And we are tremendously proud of those guys. And I'm proud of Ken, of course. Of course, that's why I marry him.
Right.
But, it's just pleasure to even see them here. The fact that they're together, even though they're in different school. I mean, I don't know, it's some kind of silly thing for us parents, but we just having great pleasure just watching them grow and be so different, even though that they are like 1 minute apart from each other being bored, right? And they are so different. They have different looks. They develop differently. They have different interests. And I don't know. At least the life is not very boring when you have three different guys. So I mean,
John, if I could just add,
Yes, sir.
I think when people meet our family,
yeah,
the talking point is not me,
Yeah.
it's the triplets.
yes,
Right, exactly.
So unique.
Well, I mean, there are talking points all the way along, which is what makes this such a tremendous story. Guys, I want to go back to you just briefly, and that is, do you guys ever have arguments about who's older and who's the more mature one and anything like that?
I wouldn't say we do. Not certainly not of those things specifically, but we the three of us, we could never really relate to all those stories you hear of people that are siblings and they always are fighting with each other. We just could never really relate to the same extent to those stories because we've kind of always just gotten along beyond any minor teasing, which is pretty much expected for any kind of relationship. We've never really had any serious issues or rivalries between the three of us, which just makes it a perfect situation.
Of course,
Go ahead.
Of course, while growing up, we did have like some bickering and arguing, like when we were kids, as kids normally do. Though as we kind of continued to like mature and like really grow older, we just kind of let everything go. It became like very relaxed relationship. We always tried to help each other out, and there's kind of like I suppose when this comes up in conversation, the way we like to describe a relationship is that like if two of us ever like found ourselves like butting heads or arguing everything, there was always the third one who could act as like a mediator or like a negotiator in a way, so that nothing would really ever escalate. So it was always just like everything that we had in terms of like, for example, we worked the same jobs, and whenever we would try to like discuss like which shift we would work on, it was always very like deliberately organized in a way so that no one could really argue against it. It was always like we had our own little systems for everything.
Is it true that there's a sort of a sixth sense among triplets and twins? You just kind of know what's going on with the other one?
Pretty much. I got to be honest, it's kind of true. Sometimes, you're talking, sometimes you're asked a question, you can look at the other two and you just know, okay, he's going to say that, he's going to disagree, he's going to agree. After being with each other for what, 18, 19 years, you kind of know the person.
How are you different from each other?
Well, let's see. I guess differences aside, no differences. I guess we'll start off with our majors. For instance, I'm going to be in more engineering. I'm more of a hands-on type of person, doing a lot of technical stuff compared to the other two.
Yeah, we all have different interests. For myself, I think it's more like physics or maybe science oriented. Again, I mentioned earlier that I'm an undeclared major, so I do not have anything concrete at the moment, but I definitely find myself more attracted to the history side of things or the physics side of things than maybe these other two would.
Yeah, and as for me, it's like I always grew up as like being more creatively oriented. Like I always tried to use a lot more like creative skills and like art and such. But then like growing up, when I initially thought that I was gonna end up as like a filmmaker, it later like kind of evolved into me doing like documentary filmmaking, because that's something that I was always interested in, mostly because I love like filmmaking in general and like communications in general, as well as its intersection with history or politics. And now I suppose I'll be translating those aspects into potentially journalism.
Are you all introverts, extroverts, a mix? How would you describe yourselves that way?
I'd say we might all be introverts. I think we all feel pretty similarly about that, where we kind of all have more like I guess a little more closed off personalities. We just like are not quite as open to meeting new people or to just kind of being open with our personalities in general. But we can all relate to each other on that, and I'm sure a lot of people can as well.
Although we do have a lot of friends, so that hasn't stopped us from, getting some good friends, getting some, nice people to be with. As now that we're separated from each other, we can't, be with each other 24/7. We have to be with other people, of course. We gotta, try something new.
Is this the first year of college for you guys?
Oh,
Yep.
yeah.
Okay, so you're still adjusting, right?
Not that much of adjusting at this point. I mean, I could say for all three of us that our first semester, it wasn't that big of a shock or a change, because the way we grew up, our mom was always taking care of our dad because we weren't always priority number one a lot of the time. So we grew to be independent. We grew to, do stuff for ourselves, so such a big change for us for college. It wasn't that big of a jolt or shock to us.
So we can thank our parents for preparing us well, I'd say, for college and the outside world.
Okay, well then I want to go back to you, Anna, because the in many ways, the burden has fallen on you, and I want to get to how you and Ken met and fell in love and all that, but talk about the challenge of being the mother of triplets, but also having to be a caretaker as well.
Well, let's put it this way. I came to this country with master's degree in organizing, management, organization. Okay. So I actually had a degree in it, how to organize everything, life included. So it took a while for me. I mean, it took me some time to figure out everything, but when you go along, you plan for everything, and then you have a backup plan for backup plan to do the things with Ken, for example, because you cannot just forget something when you go away or things like that. You cannot forget something irreplaceable. You cannot just go to the store and pick up something that Ken would need away from home. So it's all planning. It's all planning with Ken, planning with the boys, and I'm sure that was kind of hard for everybody to actually stick sometimes to the plan, even though that we know that every plan can be changed on the fly. But sometimes I would just want boys to do something very quickly or on time because we cannot spare a minute, kind of thing. It's hard. It was hard sometimes. I'm sure that when they were very small, kind of resented, but it's like you have to keep the duck on the row, kind of thing, and you cannot just go away and do things what you want. You just kind of listen to me, and they, with time, trust me that something that I said needs to be done the way it is, because we don't have a choice, kind of thing. And hopefully they understood that, when I told them to, let's say, let's put this way, Ken needs me. Something happens, or something that, I cannot just leave Ken alone with whatever it happens, right? Mm-hmm. So I said, okay, I don't have time to do this and that. Let's say dinner, okay? So you guys doing dinner for yourself, you have a toaster oven, you have a microwave, you have this and that. You just have to do it for yourself. That's how we kind of survive, right? But also, I taught them that how to do the laundry, how to help me clean up the house. They were helping me outside in the garden. Lately, they were doing, shoppings for me or things like that. So, for example, when I got sick, it happens, not very often, but it happens. Boys would pick it up, whatever I left off. So nothing would fall apart, kind of thing, without me.
Go ahead. Sure, go ahead, Ken.
In addition to Anna encouraging the boys to be independent, she encouraged them to help me as well.
Yeah.
So that they pitched in to help me as well. in addition to their mother helping me all the time. So it was really a family affair that makes sure all of us had our needs met and were doing well. And that's what made us even closer.
Right. One thing, Anna, I wanted to ask you is everything I've heard about caregiving is that caregivers need to take care of themselves as well. How did you go about, or did you go about taking care of yourself so that you could sustain and take the long view?
Well, it's hard. Usually can see something going on with me and he would say, go to the doctor, go to the doctor. I don't have time to go to the doctor. Okay. But, the hardest time was, I think, when pandemic struck. And my nightmares were actually when I could sleep, right? The anxiety was over the room. When I was afraid that I would get sick to the point that I will not be able to take care of everybody, especially Ken, because we don't have a backup. Since boys were 7 years old, we just don't even have a nanny or anything like that. So we just 5 of us, that's it. So that was my nightmare. Something happened to me. I could handle boys being sick or Ken being sick. But me, that was the worst thing. And I remember just to kind of like deal with this anxiety, I started to run more than ever before. I used to be like 6 miles a day. Now I was doing 10 miles a day just to deal with the anxiety. Sadly, lately my knee is giving up. So I cannot do that for the past couple of days. So I went back on the bike, for example. But, the physical activity, if I have time, which is sometimes hard to find that time in the day, that's what I do, just to deal with this mental anguish that, anything else, because that's the more important thing.
Do you have advice for caregivers?
Well, taking care of yourself, it's a good advice. For me, the most important thing to even function in this relationship as a mother and a wife is to keep myself in a good physical condition, because without it, my back will be off and I will not be able to do anything. So of course I have to feel well enough to go on, apart from mental preparation for this. But keep yourself in good shape.
Okay. Ken, I want to bring you back in to talk about the rehabilitation stage. And, it was such a steep uphill climb. Talk a little bit about, once it was established that there probably was not going to be much improvement. Talk about your rehabilitation. What happened?
Well, John, I spent a total of 9 months and 20 days in various hospitals and rehabilitation centers. And it took a few months before I could even sit up in a wheelchair without passing out. So it was certainly a slow process. But once it was clear that I would not be getting my movement back, the Rusk Institute, where I was doing my rehab, tried their best to get me fitted with different braces and splints so that I could do some daily activities for myself. You have a picture up now with me with a splint that I use to type with the eraser of a long stick or pencil. I mean, when I was hurt, they didn't have laptop computers back then. So I was learning how to type on an IBM Selectric typewriter. And in that same type of splint, I learned how to turn pages of a book and operate an electric wheelchair. So a good deal of my physical therapy there was, I guess, also occupational therapy, was to prepare me to do some tasks by myself, so that I would be able to eventually return to school.
How were you able to move your hands? I'm assuming you were not able to feel in your fingers. Am I right?
Right. And I still can't move my hands. What I have, John, is a little bit of movement in my left arm. If you can see on the camera, I could move my left arm, but not my wrist or my fingers. And on the right side of my body, I could just sort of shrug my shoulder a bit. And I have no sensation just a few inches below my shoulders. I have no sensation through most of my body. It's about 3 or 4 inches below my shoulders and up that I have sensation.
So that means then that, I mean, most people, when they are in communication with other people, there's a sense, there's an instinct to touch the hand or the shoulder, which makes no difference to you. You don't have that sensation. So how do you handle, or how should other people handle touching you, or should they touch you? I mean, how do we relate to someone who is in your situation? What's your experience and what's your advice?
John, I really try and put people at ease as best I can when we first meet. And I think it's natural for most people, as soon as they meet me, to put their right hand out in an attempt to shake my hand.
Mm-hmm.
And I do my best to put them at ease. And I say, unfortunately, I can't shake hands, but it's very nice to meet you.
Mm-hmm.
And, over the course of a conversation, hopefully I put them a little more at ease. But in terms of touching, unfortunately, sometimes if I get touched, it creates a muscle spasm where my body starts shaking a bit involuntarily.
Oh, my.
But I like the fact that if somebody touches my shoulder, it feels good. It feels nice. And I don't want people to be afraid to reach out, whether it be to try and shake my hand or to, touch my shoulder. It feels fine. And I think sometimes people are taken aback when, they try and guard themselves in terms of what they say. And if they say, why don't we go for a walk? And suddenly they feel badly that, they know I can't walk. I don't mind statements like that. I say the same thing. Let's go for a walk, or do something active. That doesn't bother me a bit. In fact, I prefer people trying to be as natural as they can around me.
Excellent. This is, I mean, you were determined to finish your education. And this is a picture of you. I mean, we take those cuts through the curb that accommodate wheelchairs. We take it for granted now. But back then, this is the early 70s, there weren't those things. And this is just an example of not only, just navigating the street, but you had to be bumped up and down stairs. There were no ramps back then. Talk about the challenges that you faced just getting your degree.
John, these pictures that you're showing are my first year back at Cornell, and this was my first personal care attendant that I had, who became a good friend. His name is Dave McMurray. And at the time I went back to Cornell, there was not one ramp or curb cut on the entire campus. This was about 20 years before the Americans with Disabilities Act. And that act made a tremendous difference in terms of making not just colleges and universities and schools accessible, but making the public more accessible as well, whether it be stores, restaurants, movie theaters, government buildings. Just about everything now is wheelchair accessible, which makes such a difference to somebody in a wheelchair.
Well, and you were, in a sense, instrumental, or at least involved in making that possible because of your testimony before the Senate Health Subcommittee, chaired by Ted Kennedy. Talk about that and the influence that you feel you had in maybe contributing to the Americans for Disabilities Act.
Well, I had the opportunity to testify before Senator Kennedy's Senate Health Subcommittee on healthcare just a little less than 6 months after I was injured. So I was actually a still patient at Rusk at the time when I met Senator Kennedy. And I think what he was most interested is hearing from my father, Leonard Kunken, who was an insurance salesman, because my father told the senators that at the time of my injury, there was not a health insurance coverage out there that would cover an injury such as mine, and that more work needed to be done to make at least the insurance industry more accommodating to people with severe needs. And as a result, I think that helped get passage of legislation such as the Affordable Care Act, which has helped so many people.
So many years after.
Yes, it took a while, unfortunately, but work has been done, progress has been made. So both in the healthcare system with insurance coverage, and now, of course, with the Americans with Disabilities Act with accessibility, which makes a big, big difference.
We are in the middle of a presidential campaign, and the choices are stark. The Republicans feel that there should be no big government. Government really has no role, should have no role in other people's lives, whereas the Democrats are much more interested in having government help the be involved in the lives of people who especially need help. Can you speak to? I'm putting you on the spot politically, I suppose, but talk to the political philosophy that says you don't need any help. Just pull yourself up from your bootstraps.
John, sometimes almost everybody needs help at some point in their life. And as it turns out, the help that I received with respect to rehabilitation and getting assistance to go back to school and get my degrees has helped me to be able to work for more than 40 years. And had I not had that help and had been forced to sit home during all that time, it would have taken more resources from the government to support me. This way, by giving some resources towards the help and education and guidance that somebody needs when they're in need of help early on, in the long run, it's so far cost beneficial than not providing that help. And one of the things they need to do is now take away the disincentives from somebody going back to work, because so many times somebody may lose funding from Medicaid or Social Security disability to pay for their personal care attendant or some medical needs that may prevent people from going back to work. And that still needs to be changed. More work needs to be done that way. But providing assistance not only improves somebody's quality of life, but it helps the public in general with what that person can now do and accomplish.
How were you able financially, or how was your family able financially to be able to help you during these bleak first years after the accident?
I was really fortunate that my father had a major medical policy that covered me at the time of my injury because I was a minor at the time. And that was with Mutual of New York Insurance Company, where my father was an insurance agent. But even that policy would have not have been enough to cover all my expenses. But I think because they valued my father's help so much as one of their agents, that they increased the coverage that I had a number of times to provide a lot of the financial support I needed to pay for my personal care attendants. And then when I went to work, they could have stopped that funding, but they continued to provide for my personal care attendant because they thought it was important that I go to work and make something of my life and contribute to society. And I think that made a big, big difference. And I was so fortunate to have that coverage, which most people don't have.
Until we got married.
Yeah. Well, once we got married, that coverage stopped. But by that point, I was able to support myself with the work I was doing.
Speaking of marriage, there you are. This is the first picture that was taken of the two of you. This would have been, what year was this? 90 something?
98.
My father actually took that picture. We were at my Aunt Lorraine's house at that time. And I think that was in
September 99.
September 1999, when Anna and I had met just a few months before that. And my father took that picture.
How did you meet?
Um, I needed at the time a personal care attendant to help me on weekends. And I had so many different attendants over the years that I found what I usually did to find an attendant was put an ad in the newspaper
Mhm.
and interview people that responded to my help wanted ads. And somebody suggested that I can usually get a lot of positive responses if I put an ad in the Polish Daily News, which was published here in New York. So at that recommendation, I put an ad in the Polish Daily News because at the time I needed an attendant to help me on weekends. And I've had women in the past help me, but one of the problems with having a woman help me is part of the job is to be able to lift me from the bed to the wheelchair and from the wheelchair back into bed. And I found that leverage makes a big part of lifting me much, much easier. And by leverage, I mean the taller the woman is, usually the more easy it is for a woman to lift me. And most women that were responding to my ad were between 5'2" and 5'4" tall, which was just too short to reach over my very high backed electric wheelchair to lift me. So every time a woman called, one of the questions I asked is, how tall you are. I can remember.
That'll get you in trouble now, right?
But I remember explaining it's very important for the job because you need to be able to reach over the chair to lift me. And I remember asking Anna how tall you are. And she immediately responded, 184 centimeters. And fortunately, I was good with numbers and I'm doing the math in my head, 2.54 centimeters to an inch times 184. And it was like, wow, that's a little over 6 feet tall. So, of course, I knew I needed to meet Anna. And she responded to the ad, came in for an interview. And I could tell immediately that she would not only be perfect for the job, but would be a great companion that I really wanted to get to know better.
And so now, Anna, pick up the story there. What was it like from your perspective, first, getting involved with Ken as one of his caregivers?
Let's put this way. I came from very kind of even country. Everything is the same. Everybody Catholic, everybody white, everybody, everything is the same culture. There's no changes, right? No mixed. And then I came to New York, not United States only, but New York, which is like the place unusual for itself because there is so many from different places all around the world. And you learning about different cultures, languages, and cuisines, everything is just different than in my country. And then on top of that, I met Ken, which is like, that's different on its own, right? It's not just culture, language, cuisine, some, color of the skin, but being in that condition, for me, it was just like bizarre on how you can function, right? I never met somebody with that kind of disability. So, I mean, back in Poland at that time, nobody, it was like 70s in United States, right? Nobody was out there. It was just, you could not see anybody. Nothing was accessible either, like 30 years earlier in United States. So now I'm coming in, I see Ken, and he is so independent, okay? He working, he has his own place to live. He just decided about everything what's going on in his life, including hire or not hire me. So I came to his apartment, and we were talking, of course, about the responsibilities of the job and things like that. But then we kind of slip into just regular conversation about movies we like. So, I mean, after a while, just you don't even remember why I came here. I was just interested in the person. So I was just leaving the place, and I was thinking, okay, I'm not going to get a job because I don't have an experience, right? But I was just trying to figure out how I can get in touch with Ken. For whatever reason, I'm just keep talking to the guy.
Why was that? Why was that?
I don't know. I could not get over it. I mean, I don't know. eyes and the smile, everything, the whole package. It was fascinating for me. So it wasn't long before I completely lose myself, I guess.
Well, and now, Ken, you had been in other relationships, and your book goes into detail about, infatuations and breakups, and I mean, in many ways, falling in love is a universal experience, and you did it. So, and Anna was she's a catch, but it didn't look like it was going to happen there for a while, right?
Right, John. And once I injured my spinal cord, so many thoughts were racing through my mind. How I was going to live my life, what I was going to do, would I ever be able to work? But one of the thoughts that was constantly in my head was, could I ever have a meaningful relationship with a woman? I think every young man thinks that someday they'd like to meet a very special woman and have a meaningful and long-term relationship. And I thought once I was injured, there would be no possibility that that would ever happen. And I was so fortunate to have met a number of really spectacular young women that, not only I was attracted to, but fortunately they seemed attracted to me as well. And I was so fortunate to have a number of different relationships with women that progressed to the point that it gave me enough confidence to be more open and forthcoming and assertive when I met Anna. And I think that made a big difference.
When you were injured, did some friends fall away?
I wouldn't say that some friends fell away. I think the way I would characterize it was that many of my friends back then were friends that I made through my involvement with athletics.
Mm-hmm.
And since that was the total way I was relating to some of these people, once I was no longer involved in athletics, that type of relationship ended with the people that I only played sports with. But my good friends stayed very close, including high school friends that I kept in touch with and still keep in touch with. In fact, one of them, Judge Russell Cannon, you helped Judge Cannon with his book as well. And that's how I was introduced to you, John.
That's right.
Cannon.
You guys go way back, and he has definitely stuck with you over time.
More than 60 years.
That's
and
amazing.
I had other good friends, a person by the name of David Gilbert, who I met when I was in the 2nd grade, a person by the name of Richard Gilman, who I met in the 7th grade, that our friendships grew even closer after I was injured. So not only did some of my close friends stay close and even closer, but I met so many new individuals that became very close and special friends to me and was so helpful in so many ways.
I want to bring the boys in again because you can have had plenty of opportunities to navigate, the emotional shoals of romance. What advice? Let me ask the boys, guys. Has Dad given you, dating advice?
Well, I got to be honest. I think the circumstances that our dad has versus what we have, not only based on his condition, but of course time frame, the technology that we have now. I think it's culture as well. I think it's a little different now. He hasn't given us too much, unfortunately, but hopefully we can start utilizing that soon.
Well, what's different? What's different about his day versus your day? The human heart is still the human heart.
Well, yes, but now it's how you reach the human heart. For instance, he had to go up to people, he had to be very forward. Now you have technology, you have cell phones, you have, different social medias. You don't even have to, see someone face to face for years before you actually start meeting them face to face for you to start a relationship. So now it's, I guess, the way you step forward, the way you meet people have now become quite a bit different.
Either of the other two want to add to that?
I could say, I guess you could call that the 6th sense. He kind of said what we were thinking. They're just, I suppose there's a lot more different ways of communication than there were in our dad's day, which is definitely a difference and makes, I guess you can say, it makes things a little more complicated.
Not
Well-
to mention, like, if I would add, like, I suppose if he did give a lot of us advice, I worried that, like, some of the stuff that he would tell us, like, we would silently, like, consider to be, like, old fashioned, because, like, of course nowadays, like, now college life in the 2020s is a lot more different than the 1970s. There's a lot more different expectations as to how you actually approach and talk to people, and, like, exactly what you talk about and how you present yourself.
Oh my, some things never change. This is a universal thing. It's almost as if when the kids are living at home, you know, that's when the parenting still happens. But as the kids get older and they move away, you know, your role as a parent, your influence wanes, and that's got to be difficult. Ken and Anna, how do you handle this as the boys become much more independent? Is this a difficult time?
John, I would say it's quite an adjustment for Anna and myself not to have the boys with us all the time. But I might also add, it's probably a big adjustment for them as well. Going away to college was the first time they were ever separated for more than 3 days at a time. Before that, they had never gone more than 3 days without being together, more than 4, without being together. And they seem to have handled it really, really well. And as you heard at the beginning of this segment, their birthday, they turned 19 on January 24th, was the first time we were ever not with them on their birthday, but also they were not even together on their birthday. So what an adjustment it's been for all of us. But they all seem to be doing great.
They do.
We're surviving on our own. So things have been working out real, real well.
And Ken, is it you've heard them say, you know, well, geez, some of Dad's advice is probably, you know, old school. How do you feel about that? I mean, you and I are probably about the same age, and
right.
you know,
I feel you're right on the money, John. I can't disagree with that at all.
Yeah, but I mean, you know, if they're in a relation, if one of them is in a relationship, and it's like, well, does she like me or not, and how should I communicate? You know, isn't there still an instinct for you to, you know, say, dude, you know, you need to try this or do that or don't do this?
John, my advice was try and meet somebody just like their mother. If they do that, they will not go wrong with anything else they decide to do.
Nicely said. Well said. This is why you guys have been married for so long.
You're scoring points at this point. Very nice.
Didn't work for you.
That's right.
Let's look then at this is you on your wedding day. Now, how long was it from when you met to when you actually got married?
Well, let's see. We met in April of 1999, and we ended up getting married June of 2003. So we knew each other for a little more than 4 years at the time. And John, I might add that while Anna and I get along great, we are actually different in so many ways. I mean, for one, Anna's 19 years younger than I am.
Mm.
And Anna was born and raised in Poland, while I've spent almost my entire life here on Long Island. Anna is Catholic, and I am Jewish. Anna's over 6 feet tall, and I'm just under 5'8".
Mm.
And Anna's a vegetarian, and I love to eat meat. And Anna's in exceptional physical condition. She runs 10 miles every day while I'm almost totally paralyzed. And yet it just seemed like a match that worked. It was, if I have to say, made in heaven that the two of us would meet, get together, and progress to have 3 wonderful sons.
Aren't they great?
There were some breaks in between those 4 years, right?
A few, and those breaks convinced us even more that we were right for each other.
Yeah, because it's not like he had to convince you, right, Anna?
Well, he actually did have to. kind of.
Okay.
In the meantime, before the day of the engagement, right? You're right. That's me. But before that, he needed to work on me to come back. But what I'm just saying, um, the one lesson, if I have to anybody who is in any kind of relationship, especially kind of going into the serious one, don't be afraid to stay away from each other for a while. Let's say breakup, separation, or something like that.
Why do you say that?
They to understand that you cannot find anybody like that so easy. So just to appreciate that person, sometimes to stay away from that person for a while, it actually beneficial.
Because because the flip side of that is a codependency, an emotional codependency, and by separating, you have a chance to then get reacquainted with your own self.
Not necessarily. Let's put this way. I have a brother who had a very long, relationship with a girlfriend, and they split. They just could not see themselves. I mean, they were fighting, whatever the thing is. So they spent, just like us, spent away from each other for a while. And that time make them understand this is the perfect person. I'm not going to look for anybody else. Why am I supposed to look for somebody if this is the person I should be and I cannot find anybody better, or even equally as good? So, come back to that girlfriend or boyfriend, just tie the knot and live your life.
And your brother is very happily married.
Very happy married, right? We are very happy, even though that we did experience breakup in the middle of our relationship too.
Uh-huh.
So it's not spending 24 hours a day all the time with you. It's good. You need the space,
Right.
not just for yourself, but just to miss that other person.
Okay. You mentioned, Ken, the differences, Catholic versus Jewish. And I want to, that reminds me of something that I think did come up in the book as well, because, when a person is injured in the way you were, there are a lot of people who say you need to pray about it. You need to pray for a miracle. God will heal you. And talk a bit about what it was like to be on the receiving end of various people's so-called spiritual help.
John, I had so many members of the clergy visit me when I was first hurt in the hospital. And every time they would come in, they would ask me how I'm doing. And I would usually respond, I'm doing terribly. Tell me why I got hurt. I mean, if you have this special relationship with God, tell me why I had this injury. And they usually responded in the same way, no matter what religion they were. They'd say things like, excuse me, God works in mysterious ways, but we're sure he has a plan for you. And that really didn't bring me much comfort at that time. But over the years, as I adjusted more to my physical situation and the condition that I was in, and then later began to experience more of a happy life, certainly when I met Anna and became the father of triplets, I learned that if this was God's plan, that I needed to become so disabled that I would need to meet somebody like Anna to give me the help that I need, and then fall in love with her, get married, and have 3 incredible sons. Well, then you could say I'm a believer. I think it was a pretty good plan.
So it sounds like your spirituality has evolved.
It certainly has, in a very good way.
How would you describe it? Can you put it into words? What you would say?
Well, I would say it's not a question of what religion you're in, whether it be Jewish, Catholic, Muslim, any other religion. It's not a question of believing in a certain type of religion. I think it's a question of being a more spiritual being, that believing basically in the golden rule: do unto others as you'd like others do unto you, and try and do the right thing in every situation you're in. Look for the good in people and things will hopefully then work out in the end. And I think it makes a big difference.
Is there any kind of spiritual discipline that you have, like spiritual breathing or deep breathing, or, you know, the power of the moment? Is there anything that you do that might be helpful to others as well as yourself?
John, all I have to do is think of my wife and my 3 kids, and that does it every time. No matter how depressed I may get, if I think of those 4 individuals, it brings me right out of it, puts a smile on my face.
Well, and here's a picture of you and Anna at your wedding, and this is the first dance. And of course, you talk about walking. You know, she's sitting on your lap in your wheelchair, and Russ Cannon was at the wedding. He said there wasn't a dry eye in the place. Describe this moment.
That was actually the first time we ever did a dance like that. We had suggested a number for the band to play for our first dance. And when they played it, Anna got on my lap, and you can see my left arm, my left hand is on the control switch of my wheelchair. And I wheeled us around the dance floor. And not only was there not a dry eye in the place, but we had a wonderful time participating in our first dance.
I did try to actually get hold on that wheelchair joystick. Didn't go well. So I gave it up very quickly to you. Back to you.
I almost wheeled us off the dance floor.
Yeah.
That's the equivalent of stepping on his toes, I suppose. Right? Yeah.
But it was wonderful.
We still have not talked about your career as an assistant district attorney. This is a great shot of you at work with the door half open and the nameplate. And you go into detail in your book about, you know, not only getting your degree, but, you know, the first times that you actually had to practice law in front of a judge. And again, there were mobility issues, stairways, all these kinds of obstacles. Talk about the challenges that you faced becoming and practicing as an attorney.
Well, John, when I was first working, before I went to law school, I worked as a vocational rehabilitation counselor at Abilities Incorporated, which was part of what was then called the Human Resources Center and is now called the Viscardi Center. And that's here on Long Island. And as part of my work there, I was one of the organization's consultants on affirmative action for people with disabilities and work site and job site modifications. And I used to speak before groups and organizations on those topics. And often I would be asked questions at the end of my talk. And I was always very careful, and when I was answering those questions, to caution the questioners that they should really consult with a lawyer about their concerns. And I guess it didn't take long after doing that for a while to think, you know, there's no reason why I couldn't become that lawyer. And in addition, I have an older brother named Steve, who was a lawyer at the time. At the time, he was working for the public defender's office in Nassau County, Long Island. And I used to watch him in court as well. And I used to think that also looks like an interesting aspect of law that I could do. So I decided that what I really wanted to do was to become a lawyer. And I left my job as a rehab counselor and I went to Hofstra Law School. And I was able to complete law school in the standard 3-year time period, and was fortunate to be hired by the district attorney's office to work as an assistant district attorney upon my graduation. So I took and passed the New York State bar exam, and I began my employment by participating in a very intensive 4-week training program to teach us all aspects of trial techniques from a prosecutor's perspective. And I was so proud to go to work my first day, only to find I couldn't fit through the swinging doorways in the courtroom. They were too narrow to allow me to get through in my electric wheelchair to where the prosecutor's table was. So when you talk about facing barriers, that's one I never anticipated was going to be an issue at the time. Again, this was well before the Americans with Disabilities Act. But now, thanks to that act, every courtroom is now wheelchair accessible. Every courthouse is accessible. And it's made it far easier for someone in my condition or others like me to now work as an attorney.
One of the things that that struck me in your book about being an attorney is that because of the the limited use of your hands, you had to rely on your memory a lot when you were doing closing arguments, when you were doing depositions. Is there what have you learned about, and what can you share about the power of memory and how you approached memorizing things in order to argue a case?
Well, I did my best to train my memory over many, many years. I did it by listening to lectures from other memory experts and reading books on memory. But also during my schooling, I had to give a number of oral presentations. And I knew that just taking notes and preparing a presentation would be difficult for me to do in writing. So I did my best to try and train my memory to remember things in a logical order. I think my background in engineering helped to develop a very logical way of approaching things and thinking. And I used to lie awake at night before I had to give any sort of talk, presentation, or try a case and think of a logical way of approaching what I needed to say and do my best not to get too nervous or anxious so that I would lose my train of thought when I'd be in front of a group of people, and proceed slowly and talk my way through whatever discussion or argument I needed to make. And I remember my first trial, John, in front of a jury. I knew that I was going to get up in front of the jury and deliver my summation without any notes in front of me, because that's the way I trained my mind. And at the last minute, I started to feel very anxious. Like, what was I thinking? I ought to have something written down in front of me, if for no other reason than to break my eye contact with the jury. So I have an excuse to look away and look down at my notes and then continue. And since it was the last minute, all I could think of doing was I took a pad, and while I could write just a very little bit with a splint on my arm, I just wrote the word confidence on this pad piece of paper. And I could remember being in front of the jury, and as I was talking with them, I looked down, saw the word confidence, and just broke out in this big smile and was able to continue without a problem. And I've been able to manage since then doing that.
So what kind of a track record did you have as a prosecutor?
Well, I'm proud to say it was a pretty good track record, but I'm not going to get into any numbers. A lot of it had to depend on the strength of a case, no matter what my skill as a lawyer was. But I received a lot of nice feedback that jurors and judges were basing their verdicts not on my inability to walk, but on my skill as an attorney. And
Wow.
Fortunately, I've been told from others that I had quite a bit of skill that I'm very proud of.
We've been, we've talked about what your life was like before the accident. We've talked about the rehabilitation, the fact that you were told, you weren't going to be able to do much more than just sell magazines over the phone. Obviously, you proved that one wrong by getting not only your Bachelor of Science, but 2 master's degrees and a law degree, practiced law, fell in love. Someone fell in love with you. It's just quite the success story, I guess you could say. Let's talk briefly about becoming a dad. I mean, this again, you go into detail about it in the book. You're the biological father of the twins, and
Triplets.
I'm sorry, the triple. Thank you. Details. Didn't mean to leave one of you out, but this was an excruciating process. Talk about the experience.
Well, John, when Anna and I first talked about getting married, Anna told me that she'd like to have my baby. Not just a baby, but my baby. She said she wanted to see a little Kunken running around our home. Now, at the time she told me this, I had been paralyzed for more than 30 years, and I was already in my 50s. So this really seemed impossible to me. But Anna was convinced that whatever we do in our lives, we're going to push the envelope to do more than anybody ever thought possible. In fact, one of the reasons why I picked the title of my book, I Dream of Things That Never Were, is because we intended to make those dreams come true, things that nobody ever thought would be possible. And we looked into various options, including in vitro fertilization, and found it still may be possible for someone in my condition to father a child. So we decided to pursue it. And it was quite an adventure, but fortunately it worked out to the day that you see Joey, Jimmy, and Timmy in front of you. We're very fortunate.
Well, and this is a picture from the book as well. And there, I encourage people to go to your website, because there is a gallery that goes into much more detail about your story, and there are pictures at every stage of your life, your upbringing, time in school, and so on. So KenKunken.com is the place to go, and that's also where people can contact you. And this is a wonderful picture of you just taking them for a spin, although I suppose it would not be, it's also for a walk, I suppose. Guys, what was that like to go spinning around the neighborhood like that?
Well, it's been a little while since we were light enough to fit on it. So I don't think we can do that now, I guess. But of course, it was fun for us. We got to ride around. Our dad was always like, of course, he always liked to teach us no matter what. As he said, he would like go around. He'd be like, "That's a fire hydrant. That's a stop sign, plane." Just showing us around, showing us the neighborhood. And then soon, of course, we would walk beside him. And we always like to go on walks. It's always nice to just get some fresh air. Be outside. So
Did people stop and talk to you guys?
Of course, a lot of people asked us questions saying, "Oh, I remember you when you were only this little," or something like that. Talking to our dad, commenting on us when we were little kids. It's just something nice to meet new people as well.
Exactly. Anything you other two want to add, or is James the family spokesperson here?
You got it all down.
So let's see. We're nearing the end. You guys have all been incredibly generous with your time. And is there? Let me just bring everybody in here. Hold on. It's a low budget operation, as I said. What's next? I mean, are you going to work on another book? Anna, are you going to write a book? Guys, are you going to write a book? What's next?
Well, John, I'm so enthused that we had this book published, and I want to thank you for all your help that you gave us in firstly helping the writing of the book, and then helping us prepare a book proposal. And we were so fortunate that Judge Cannon put us in touch with Steve Eric, who is the owner of the publishing company 12 Tables Press. And fortunately, Steve Eric picked up our book and decided to publish it. And right now, what we've been doing is engaging in a lot of different events to promote the book. And we're so glad that the book is finally out there in print. And we're anxious to do as many events as we can to let people know that they could share my story by reading this book.
Anybody have anything else to add? Anything that I haven't covered? I mean, there's so much in the book that really goes into detail at every step along the way. But I so appreciate that you've all been able to be here. Anybody have any last thoughts?
Well, John, I know you mentioned about going to my website, kenkunken.com, and that will tell the people where they can purchase the book. Now, certainly one of the places is at Amazon, but in addition, if they're going to order it in bulk, there's an address in there to go to Steve Eric personally, the publisher, and he will tell them about how they can purchase it in bulk.
Yeah, but just one thing. I mean, I was always into books. If I could, I would be a librarian probably, even back in Poland. But we just checked today or yesterday, the catalog in Rockwool Center Library, which is like part of the Nassau County Library system here on Long Island. And we see that the Rockwool Center Library has 4 copies, and Oceanside has 1 copy, and none of them is available. You have no idea how big pleasure for me is that in library, so many copies, and they are all out. People are reading the book, because buying the book is kind of easy. The reading part, it seems to be more complicated for many people. They like to have a feel of the book, but they kind of not really reading the thing. I mean, they like to have it on their shelf, but reading the story, it's more involved.
It is.
I'm just so glad that people in the libraries, I can see that they're taking this out to read it, actually. So I just want not to earn money, sell as many books as possible, just that's Ken goal, I guess. But but the story to be out there, and for hopefully somebody would learn something, maybe get some hope for themselves or the family member, or anything. Just hopefully that will inspire them to do more.
John, if I could just add to that, in addition to the hard copy of the book, it's also out on a Kindle version. And before I wrote this book, John, I used to do a good amount of motivational speaking. And it seemed like almost every time after I finished a talk, somebody would raise their hand and ask me if I ever thought about writing a book, because they indicated you could reach far more people that way if they were able to read your book rather than you having to go out and speak to groups every time. So I'm so glad that we finally published this book. And I've been getting very nice comments and feedback from so many different individuals who've had the chance now to read it. And we just got a review from Kirkus Review.
Right.
That was a very positive, exciting review. And we're very enthused with the way the book sales have been going.
There is a...
How long it took you actually to write the thing?
Yeah, good question.
John, I actually started writing this book while I was still in the hospital.
Yeah.
4 weeks to the day after I got hurt. A friend of my aunt's named Albert Meglin came to visit me in the Rusk Institute and suggested that I write a book. He thought, one, it would help because at the time I was very depressed with the condition I was in. And he thought talking about it and putting it down on paper would be helpful. And he also felt that it could be very informative to others to let them know what I was going through and what the rehabilitation process was like.
Would you say that the experience of writing it was therapeutic?
Yes and no. I would say it was therapeutic, but it also dredged up a lot of very painful memories.
Right.
And times from the past that I did not cherish reliving, especially in detail, but I'm glad that I did to let people know exactly what it was like. And one of the comments that I received from many people is that I went into so much detail about events that happened over 50 years ago. And the reason I was able to do that is because I started writing it more than 50 years ago.
There's a question that someone asked in the chat, and I've put it up on the screen. The questioner asks, how has the technology available to quadriplegics advanced since you were injured? What are some of the key tech devices that you're using now?
I see that's from Lee Grunfeld, and that's an individual that I grew up and went through school in Oceanside with, who I haven't seen or spoken with in many, many years. So Thank you, Lee. Things have changed so much since my injury. I mentioned the Americans with Disabilities Act. I also mentioned that there were not laptop computers back then, right? In fact, it was difficult to use any type of computer back then in 1970 when I was injured. So now technology has developed to where on my joystick in my wheelchair, it has a Bluetooth device that I could actually work the computer by moving the joystick. That will move the mouse and enable me to even type on the computer just by moving the joystick. But in addition, now they have voice recognition systems out there. And while I never had a good deal of success when I first tried using a voice recognition system many, many years ago, they've been perfected quite a bit since then, where I know more and more people with disabilities can use a computer by using voice recognition. So the wheelchairs have improved so much in the last more than 50 years since I've been injured. And you mentioned at the beginning that I felt like, or it seemed like the medical personnel thought the best I would ever be able to do would be to sell magazine subscriptions over the telephone. Well, back then the telephones were rotary telephones. They weren't even push button phones. So I had difficulty even dialing the telephone back then. So technology has gone a long way, making it far easier and accessible for people with disabilities to utilize.
This has been such a joy to be able to spend time with you all. And guys, boys, I'm especially appreciative of the fact that you took time out, you got together, hung out with each other and with your mom and dad and with the rest of us. And Anna and Ken, it's been a treat to be able to talk to you. And I look forward to keeping in touch. And I certainly encourage people to read your book and learn more about you. Thank you all for being on One to One.
Thank you again, John, for giving us the opportunity to tell my story and talk about the book. And thank you again for all your help in getting this book written and published.
Great suggestions, really, especially about the cutting things out of the book. At some point.
Thank you. Well, it's fun working with you guys, and it's great. I think, Ken, this is probably the first time that we've actually seen each other face to face. It's always been over the phone.
Right. Well, it's great to have this opportunity to talk with you.
Great. To be continued. Thank you.
Thank you, John.